Hey all, and welcome to this practical on using Data Protection Manager. For this practical, we'll be requiring two machines, one that is running System Center Data Protection Manager, and a second machine that is having an SQL database. For demonstration purposes, I'm using the System Orchestrator server loaded with SQL Server Management Studio. Uh, in my SQL Server Management Studio, what I've done is I've gone into databases and I've created a demo database. This demo database is having one table called DBO students, which is having two columns, one for name and one for roll number. So if I run a query right now on this table, I can see that I have I have around two rows of data already inputted into this. po.students and execute. Alright, the reason I'm doing this is so that after I take a recovery point, I'm planning to insert more data into this and then do a restore back to this database to check whether is my recovery point successful or not. uh, Once you have done this, once I've entered some data, maybe a single row of data or maybe multiple rows. Alright, after I have created a database in my SQL Management Studio, I will come into my Data Protection Manager console on my DPM server. There are three things that need to be done. First thing is I need to have an agent, I need to have a disk, and I need to create a protection group. If I click on disks and click on add, you will see that currently I am not having any disk at all over here. What I've done is inside of my VMware I've attached a 20 gigabyte virtual hard disk. If I go into computer management and disk management, I can see that this disk is now showing as 20 GB and unallocated. You can also see that it's showing as offline. What you need to do is right click on top of this and put this online over here. The moment you put it on it, it'll say non initialize. So you need to right click on top of it again, select initialize disk, and you can select this GPT, that is GUID partition table, and click on OK. Once the disk is initialized, I will come back into my data protection manager. I will click on the add option in disk and my disk will now be visible. I'll just click on the add button and finally click on OK. Alright, so after I click on OK, my disk will now be displayed over here. I'm seeing it having a 19.87 gig capacity and it is 100% unallocated. Next step is involving with agent. Now what are servers which I want to have, whose data who I want to take a backup or a recovery of, it needs to have an agent install of it. So right now, because I've created a database on my system orchestrator server, I will need to install the agent onto the system orchestrator server. So I can go to agents, click on the install option on top. I'll be installing an agent. I'll be clicking next. I will select system center orchestrator, click add, which will now display the orchestrator server on the selected computers on the right hand side. I'll click next again. I will give the administrative credentials next, and I will select no. I will restart the computer later. Then click next and I'll click on install. The protection agent will now begin installing on top of the selected server. So alright, uh, if you have any, alright, so I'm installing the agent onto my system orchestrator server. I will select agents, install agents. I'll click next. I will select my system center orchestrator server. I'll click on add, click on next. I will specify the administrative account, and I'll click next, and I will select no. I will restart this selected computer later. So I've added one 20 GB disk into my storage pool, and I have installed my data protection manager agent onto my system center orchestrator server. Now, just doing these two things is not enough. Since I'm working with an SQL database, there's one more thing that needs to be done. If you go on to your SQL database management studio, you will see when you log in there's an option called security, and that there's login. In that there's an account called NT authority slash system. You need to right click on top of this, go into the properties, and inside the properties for server roles, you need to make sure that this account needs to have sysadmin rights onto the database. As well, whatever account you'll be logging into, like for example I'm logging in as a decent admin account, you will also need to check that account whether it has the sysadmin server role. Now, I need to create a protection group. For creating a protection group, I will need to go into the protection option in data protection manager. Once I go into a protection option, I will get the option. I will need to then create a protection group. If you see over here, before you start protecting data, you need to add this to the storage pool, which we have done, check. We need to install a protection agent also, which we have done, check. Now to create a protection group, I will go on top to menu, and I will click on the new option. Once I click on new option, it'll give me a create a new protection group wizard. In this wizard, I'm doing the protection on top of servers, hence I will click next. I will go into system center orchestrator server, and in this I will select the demo database which I just created. So I'll be taking a backup or a recovery point of my demo database. Once I tick mark it, it'll come under the selected members section. I'll click next. I will create the protection group as SOC group, SOC protection. Right. I'm doing a backup to disk and short-term protection selected. I need to have the retention days as 5 days and synchronization frequency as 15 minutes. When I click next, you will see that it is giving me as disk space allocated DPM as 14.57 GB. If I change around in the retention range or the synchronization frequency, the pool allocation will change as well. Like it now will gone to 12.77 GB. So what is happening is, since I want to store my backups for 5 days and the synchronization frequency will happen for 15 minutes, it is deciding that how much space would be required for this 5 days worth of backup. Similarly, if I change it to 2 days, and if I increase the synchronization frequency to maybe once every 24 hours, the disk space required or disk space which would be allocated would be reduced. I'll click next, and I want to automatically do replica right now. I will want to run a consistency check, and I'll click on create group. The moment I click on create group, it will start the creation of the protection group, and after the group has been created, it will also allocate space, replica based space for my demo database in my disk based storage pool. Alright, both of them are giving us success. If I click on close and see my protection group, I can see that a replica creation is in progress. So after this replica has been created, what we'll be doing is we'll be inserting a new row of data into our demo database. After a row of data has been entered, we will then come back into data protection manager and we will try to perform a recovery. The replica creation can take some more time. It can take some 2 minutes, or it can even take some 5 minutes. It depends upon the data size and the connectivity with that server. Alright, so my protection group is protection status is signed as okay. Let me just come back into my SQL database. If I run a select star from dbo.students, I can then see my database is having two rows of data, Lionel and Rahul having roll number 10 and 11. Let's say I will type a query for inserting of values. Insert into dbo.students values, and let's give Meena a roll number of 13. Okay. The moment I execute this statement, it will insert this row of data into the database. If I come back into the query and execute the statement, I will now see that my database now has three rows of data. So I'll come back into my data protection manager. To perform a recovery, I need to go to the recovery tab. In this recovery tab, left hand side is the recoverable data, which is demo db. Recovery time, let's say the recovery time, I'll move it to 10:35 p.m. and I will click on recover. When I click on recover, I need to select the recovery type, which is I want to recover to the original instance. I'll click on next. Next. I don't have a SAN, so I don't need network bandwidth usage throttling. And I finally click on recover, it'll start doing the recovery of the database to from the recovery point to the original database location. So after the recovery has been done, and if I run a select star query on the database, it should not show me three rows of data, but it should just show me two rows of data which were present before the recovery point was made. Right. I'll close this. If I come back to my database and I run a select query again, I will now see that my database is having the two rows of data which were previously there in my database before the recovery point was created. This means that my recovery point has been successful and my data has been restored to a point when the recovery was made. If I go back into protection, it may show me replica is inconsistent. What I can do, I can select this protection group and I can ask it to do a consistency check. If I want, I can perform a recovery point as well. Let me just click on consistency check, and do you want to perform? Yes. So now what it'll do, it'll now try to perform a consistency check and a verification on the data of the recovery point. If I want to create a new recovery point, I can click the new recovery point button again. So if you see now, it is showing me OK as the protection status for my protection group. So if I look at a summary at its practical, I require two machines, a machine containing a database and a machine having my system center data protection manager. On the database machine, I will create a database and I'll insert few rows of data into a table. After that, I need to set the sysadmin privileges in the user role settings of the database. Second, I will come into my data protection manager and I will need to install the agent onto the server on which the SQL database is present, the database which I want to take a backup of. Then I will need to allocate disk-based storage into my disk storage pool. Then I will create a protection group which will then take a replica of the current state of the database of that server. After replica has been created, I will insert some more rows of data into my database. I will then perform a recovery from the using the protection group and the latest recovery point. After the recovery has been successful, I will then check the data of the database whether it is showing the data which was present before the recovery point was made.